So as described in the previous video, in this video I would actually start making that custom shape that we are going to use inside our user profile view. So before I even start with creating that custom shape, I would actually like to take some time and explain you some concepts of building shapes inside Swift UI. So this is the shape that we are going to create. This is a screenshot of the app itself, which we are making currently, and there is the shape that you can see. So what's like the main core of like working with shapes inside Swift UI? So for here we have a sketch pad, and I would like to explain it to you that suppose this is the entire canvas. This is your shape area, like in the area which you have to draw the shape, whatever shape you want to make. Basically, the coordinate system starts from the top left corner, which means if you move like this, that means you are adding something on the x-axis, and if you move downwards, you are adding something on the y-axis. Okay, and if we move here, which means we are subtracting something from the x-axis. The x looks quite bad, so wait, I'll just, yeah, x, subtracting something from the x-axis. And if you're moving upwards, it means you are subtracting something from the y-axis. It's quite hard to draw with a mouse, but okay, with a touchpad. So yeah, this is what I had to explain it to you. And now this thing is cleared out, we can actually go over, and obviously there are some functions. So basically you start with an imaginary point inside your canvas. So there's nothing at the very start. It's just a starting position is that you are at the top left corner. It does not mean that your shape has some point already defined or something. No, it's up to you where you have to put your point at. So to make a point, you can use the move functionality, and this is where you move the point to anywhere in the canvas. There's add line, there's add chord curves, there's add curves. So these are the functionalities that you have with making shapes inside Swift UI. I guess there would be a couple of more APIs, but I have not like gone through all of them. But this is by far almost what you need in order to create your own custom shape. So now that that is cleared, we can actually create a new folder here, and we can name this custom and do command N and select Swift UI view and name this curvy rectangle. So you could name it anything, but like I felt that in accordance to the shape, it's more or less like a rectangle itself, but it has this curve to it from the top and the bottom. That's why I named it curvy rectangle. And obviously this curvy rectangle is not exactly a view, it is a shape. It's like rectangle, rounded rectangle, circle. So it would conform to the type shape actually. And we can remove this body property from here. Now that we are conformed to the type shape, our compiler will complain that it does not conform to this protocol because it is missing this functionality path, which actually returns a path which would be the shape in general for us. So let's quickly create a path object. So using the path class, creating an instance, it says creates an empty path, and we can just return it for now so that we know that we are returning something and the function is not throwing us errors. Now this is out of the way. What we could do is add two parameters for our rectangle. So let's see, there are two major things that we can configure from our end depending on if we want to use the same shape with certain different values in other screens. So that is the corner radius you could see on all the four corners, and there's this curve which is at the top at the bottom. So following the same functionality, it should be var corner radius, which would be of the type CG float, and this would be of the value 20 pixels, and there should be var curve amount, and this should also be of the type CG float, and it should have the value 8. So now that this much is done, you all know that for struct, the initializers are like pre-handed to us. Basically, we don't have to explicitly define any initializers. But since we have given them default values, whenever you try to call this rectangle, it won't explicitly ask us that, okay, there's this rectangle, this shape that you have created. Do you want to give this corner radius or curve amount? But we can do that. It's an optional choice for us. So yeah, coming back to the point, now that we have done this much, what we can do is that we can start by creating our shape. So as I told you beforehand, our canvas, the coordinate system starts from the top left corner. So if this is our canvas, this is where our coordinate system will start. So understanding this shape, what you can see is that we have to right off start with a curve itself at the top left corner. So let's just add some comments to keep track of where are we in terms of the canvas. So top left corner. Now the very first thing is to lay out our very first point, because right now we just have an imaginary starting point at the top left corner. There's no line, curve or any point already drawn there. It's just a point, it's just our starting point for creating our shape. So now what we can do is we can move our point a bit, because in order to create this very curve, we would actually have to start from here, right? So we can start from here, we give it another point somewhere here, and then it will draw a curve along these 2 points. That is how working with shapes are inside SwiftUI. I will just repeat myself again. Since we have to create this curve, we have to start from here, we give it another point in the canvas here, and Swift will automatically draw a curve along these 2 points, and that is in our mind. So right now you know that in our imaginary canvas, which would be this big itself for the shape size, the size of the shape that we are building, we are at the top left corner. So what we need to do now is that we are right in terms of the x-axis. Horizontally we are at the right position, that we are at the very starting bit, but vertically we need to start from a bit below, so that we have a point here, right? So from here to here we have to go down a bit, because we need to create a curve from this point to this point. So in order to do that, what we need to do is that we do path move to, and then we give it a CG point, and for the CG point there would be x and y values, and you can see the function actually has a rect in its argument itself, and what it does is that we could use the rect and we can find the minimum x value, which means the minimum value of the x, which would be the leftmost side of the canvas. And but for y, we actually need the minimum y plus the corner radius value. So as I explained it to you before, if we add something in the y, it moves downwards, and if we add something on the x, it moves right side. So that is what we are doing right now. We are adding something. So our starting point was somewhere here, the imaginary point, minimum x minimum y. We moved a bit down by adding something to the y and keeping the x the same. So we are here now, essentially this point, we are here. So now that we have done this, we have moved our very first point. Now what we can do is we can work on top left curve, basically. So this curve we are talking about. And as I explained it to you before, to move to this point, let's just understand what all we need to do. So we are at this point where the x is minimum, but the y is minimum plus the corner radius. So two things we actually need to do. We need to jump back to y as minimum. Okay, we need to go back. So no more addition. We just need to use the minimum of y to go back to this point, and then we need to add the corner radius value to x to move to this point. You understand? This point is nothing. This point is nothing but minimum of x, minimum of y plus the corner radius. So it went down. Now in order to move to this point, we have to move horizontally. So we are adding the corner radius to x, and then we have to move vertically up. So in order to move vertically up, we have to subtract something from the y, right? We have to subtract something from the y in order to move vertically up. And since you know that here we added something to y, which was the corner radius value, in order to move down, what we do now is that we no longer add anything to y, so it automatically goes up only. So this point would actually be, coming to our code, this should be path dot add quad curve, and the CG point would actually come out, oops, sorry about that, CG point would actually come out to be rect of minimum of x plus corner radius, because we have to move horizontally right, and it would just be minimum of y here. Now that we have done this much, if you have ever worked with any illustrator or any designing application, you would know that while you're trying to draw curves and circles and any shape as such, they would give you a control point. A control point is sometimes a point which is exactly at the middle from both the points, or sometimes there are two control points which there are two control points which are like equidistant from each other and the points. So these Illustrator apps works the same way. I don't exactly have in the in-depth knowledge of the geometry involved, but as far as I know, for a chord curve you need to have a control point, and that control point would actually be equidistant from both of these points. So if you have noticed, one is corner radius y, corner radius plus y, and the other is corner radius plus x. So the only point equidistance from both of them is rect of minimum x and rect of minimum y. So this is what we do here. So I hope so far you are understanding what we are doing here. We start from the top left corner. It's just an imaginary starting point. There's no actual point there that exists. Then we moved our starting point to a bit downwards so that we can draw a curve from there. And now that we have added a curve, basically the corner, top left corner radius, now we can work on this top left curve now. So in order to do that, we can write a comment also so that we have the understanding top curve of the shape. And so what we need to do now, so this is also really interesting. So you see our shape, like it does not know what we are trying to create, right? It just wants us to give us it wants us some points as inputs so that it can just create a shape around it basically. So for it, the starting point, it told us that, see, my starting point is this top left corner, this is the minimum of x and the minimum of y. Now if we tell this shape that we want to go to the maximum of x and maximum of y, what do you think, where do you think it will go? So maximum of x would be horizontally maximum, suppose till here, and maximum of y would be vertically maximum, suppose here. So the coordinate point would come out to be here basically, maximum of x and maximum of y. So now what we need to do is that in order to create this curve, we don't need to move to maximum of y, we don't need to go down, we definitely need to move right. So it would involve the maximum of x, but it won't involve the maximum of y. So the y will remain minimum of y only, but the x will become maximum of x. But now again, since we just don't have to move to a corner, a pinpointed corner, we have to create a curve. So we'll stop a bit before the actual curve. So in order to do that, we will subtract corner radius from the maximum of x so that our point actually lands here. So this point that I'm talking about would be minimum of y and maximum of x minus the corner radius. So it's assuming the maximum of x would be somewhere here after adding the corner radius to itself. So this would be the maximum of x minus the corner radius. So coming back to our code, we go path, we do add curve. Now we need to add the curve as a CG point. It would need to ask x and y values. So the x would be rect dot maximum of x, and as we explained, it should be minus corner radius, and the y would remain rect of minimum of y. Now that we have done this much, now you would notice that instead of just one control point, it has two control points now. So basically this time the control points won't actually be the same in the sense of a quad curve, and here we can have a control point somewhere around the middle of this curve and somewhere around the middle. So there should be like two control points, presumably, like they would actually contribute to the basically the curve, and I guess they should be like here and here for this curve. If I have actually worked with Adobe Illustrator, you would know that for creating a curve like this, you have a control point here which you can drag to move this part, and a control point here to drag to move this side of the curve. So basically that's what we are going to do right now. We can copy this whole thing out and we will closely make some changes here. So this CG point would actually be mid x minus the curve amount. This should be minimum y plus the curve amount, and now that we have done this much, it should be mid x and it should be plus the curve amount, and this one should be minimum y minus the curve amount. So basically coming to our shape, if we can closely see, first point would be mid of x minus the curve amount, and plus plus in the y terms means it's downwards. So the point lies somewhere here. Coming to the second control point, it is mid of x plus the curve amount. So mid of x plus the curve amount, and in the y axis it's minus the minimum of y, which means we have to go a bit up because we are minusing from the minimum of y which was already here, but now we are subtracting some points. So it is plus from the x-axis and minus from the y-axis, and we lie somewhere here, here and here for the curve are the control points. Let's just quickly go through what we have written here, and it all seems fine, and now we can move forward and we can quickly cover the rest of the shape. Now because we would be following the same procedure, now we created a quad curve, we created a curve, then we create another quad curve, and now we join these curves. So you would notice that it's more or less the same thing happening, and I would try to keep explaining the other part of the code as well. So it should be top right curve, let's say, and here we can have path dot add quad curve, and this would be a CG point, obviously CG point x and y, and it should be rect, and it should be maximum of x obviously, and it should be rect minimum of y and plus the corner radius, and then there should be a control point CG point. This CG point should have x and y values, which would be rect dot maximum of x and rect dot minimum of y. And let's just quickly go over this, and yep, this seems fine to me. Then we create the right side. The right side would actually have path dot add line now, because we are joining we are at this position now and we join this with a line, so adding a line. And this would be a CG point um, with x and y values. So the x value would be rect of maximum of x only, because we keep on tending to be on the right side, and rect of maximum of y this time, but minus the corner radius, because as you know, we are going from this point to this point, so we are on the maximum of x, we are on the maximum of y minus the corner radius, so there's something left, because now we need to add a curve from this point to this point. So that is why we stopped at that point. And now we will add the um, bottom right curve. Okay, so for the bottom right curve, it should be path dot add quad curve, and this should be a CG point. How about I copy this out so it becomes easy for us, because we don't need to keep on writing it again and again, the rect dot something. So it should be maximum of x minus corner radius. Yes, because to reach this point again we are at maximum of x minus the corner radius, similarly what we did above here, you're going to see. So this is what we are doing, rect maximum of x minus the corner radius, and it should just be maximum of y. Now that we have done this much, the CG point would be maximum of x and maximum of y, in contrast to what we just had, minimum of x and minimum of y. For the bottom, for the top left corner, we had minimum of x and minimum of y. For this curve, control point is maximum of x and maximum of y. Now that we have added this much, there should be the bottom curve. So this invert curve that now we are dealing with. So similarly to this, we can have add curve, we copy this out, we paste it here, but we definitely need to make some changes. So it should be minimum of x now, and minimum of x plus the corner radius, and it should have a maximum of y. So coming back to the point, we are going from this side to this side, and obviously if we just have written from this point to minimum of x, it would have made us reach this point, but we want to stop here because we want to add a curve from here to here. That's why we are stopping here. That's why we added minimum of x plus some corner radius, so keep it here. And for in y terms, we are in the maximum of y only, so that is what we have added. Now coming back to our control points, it would again be mid of x. This time one of them would be plus curve amount, one of them would be minus curve amount. Similarly for y, it would just be alternate this time, and it's not minimum now, it's maximum, because we are on the bottom side of the shape. So maximum of y again. Now that we have done this much, we just need to add the bottom left corner, bottom left curve, and then we can join the shape finally with a one path line, add line basically. So we can have path dot add quad curve, copy paste. Now it asks us few things, so this should be minimum of x now, because we are going here, so we reach this point, and it should be y minus something, I guess. So yeah, it should be maximum of y minus the corner radius, because now we were already in the maximum of y because we are at the bottommost part of the shape, and then we subtract something to go up, and x remains minimum. So here we land at this point from this point, and now Swift automatically adds a arc for us, but before that it needs a control point. So before even writing, we know the control point would be minimum of x and it should be maximum of y. So that's exactly what it is. So it should be maximum of y, it should be minimum of x. Now that we have added this much, we can just add the left side of the shape, and it should be path dot add line. Let's just copy paste it here, and CG point would be minimum of x, and it should be minimum of y plus the corner radius. It's exactly this thing. The very first point that we laid out, we're just adding the line to that point now. So this is it. Now that we have done this much, how about we actually make use of our curvy rectangle? So we go inside our user profile view, not user, we'll go inside our user profile view, and here we can add some changes at stack. And what I was thinking is that what we can do is like this screen itself, we will create these at stacks. So 1 2 3 4 5, and for explore we would actually have to work with gradients. So we'll come to that, and also we will build our explore page, so it makes much more sense to add it there. We can add your post shape as well. So it's the same shape. You would notice that how we can actually use it. So now that we have this much laid out, let's just start by adding the curvy rectangle. So it should be curvy rectangle, and let's just add a frame to it, and the frame would include 180 by 150, and the alignment should be nothing. And then we have a foreground color. The foreground color would be color with a UI color, and I will quickly resume this video with the shapes in the next part.